Thank you for listening to this PodcastOne production. Now available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, PodcastOne.com, and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
The Steve Austin Show is brought to you free today by our friends at BetOnline. Football has officially come to a close, but the UFC, NHL, NBA, and college basketball are all heating up. And that means some of the best odds in sports betting are going to be yours for the taking. Get in the mix at betonline.ag and use the promo code PodcastOne for your 50% welcome bonus. BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts and exclusive partner of PodcastOne Sportsnet.
The following program is a PodcastOne.com production.
From Hollywood, California, by way of the Broken Skull Ranch, this is the Steve Austin Show.
Give me a hell yeah.
Hell yeah.
Now, here's Steve Austin.
All right, everybody, welcome to Steve Austin Show. I am coming to you from the main streets of Los Angeles, California today. Man, I tell you what, I got a great show for you today that I really enjoyed doing. I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. One of my all-time favorite pro wrestlers is here on the show. We got a chance to fire up Skype with a video, and it was just like he was here sitting across the desk from me. My guest today on the show is the one and only WWE Hall of Famer, Jerry the King Lawler. Jerry the King Lawler is probably, in my opinion, one of the greatest professional wrestlers to ever lace up a pair of boots. One of the greatest promos in the history of the business. His feuds, his angles, his promos, everything that he did was just really, really top-notch. Jerry has his own podcast here on PodcastOne and all major podcast platforms. We'll talk about it during the show. I hope you enjoy this conversation because I sure enjoyed talking to a guy who had a big influence on my career, not as far as wrestling styles, but learning from him, watching him night after night in main events when I was down there starving in Tennessee. And he was either the top heel or the top babyface at the time, and a guy that could you really watch work in the ring, really listen to, cut a promo, and really learn a lot of things from. And when I think back about my time in Memphis way back in the day, there were so many great promos there. There were so many great workers, and we were working our asses off minimum 6 times a week. You couldn't help learn because you learn by doing things over and over and over. Repetition is key. When you work at weekly territory, mister, you learn because you got so many established veterans in there that you can learn from. And Jerry the King Lawler was at the top of that list. Enjoy the podcast. But right now I'd like to give a shout-out and say congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs. It's been a long time, 50 damn years, ever since Super Bowl IV. Finally, the Kansas City Chiefs take home the Lombardi Trophy. Congratulations, Andy Reid. Man, I was really loving everything that Kansas City did this entire year. I've been following Andy Reid forever, just like any other diehard football player has done. Patrick Mahomes, coming to the league a couple years ago, already has an MVP trophy in his second year, a Super Bowl MVP trophy in his third year. What a future for probably what's going to go down as a once-in-a-generation talent. That whole organization from top to bottom, that's what it takes to win a championship. And congrats to the whole organization. Congrats to the Hunt family, who have been so important in the history of the National Football League. San Francisco 49ers have such a talented team, and what a badass defense, and I like so many of their players. And, you know, Kyle Shanahan, you know, some people say maybe he made a few mistakes. I don't look at it that way. I mean, if he made a mistake, I think the team made mistakes, and a couple of calls didn't go their way. It was a football game is what it was. And all the games they won as a team. All the games they lost as a team. This was a team loss. I don't think you can point the finger at any one person over there and say, this guy lost the football game. Kansas City went out there, and at the end of the day, after 60 minutes of football, quite simply executed more plays than the 49ers. Enjoyed the game. Enjoyed the game about, maybe 7 minutes left when Patrick Mahomes finally got some traction, finally got a little free. That defensive front was just putting so much pressure on him. They had a lot of the damn receivers covered. Finally, and I never thought in a million years, first off, to overcome a 10-point deficit and then end up going 31-20 final score. I just didn't see it happening like this. I loved watching all the preamble, all the stuff before the game, guys predicting how they thought the game was going to go, and watching all the personalities and the athletes and to get inside their head as they spit out knowledge of pro football. It was just great. But they had me so worked up into a shoot, man, I was just ready to see both teams just come out blaze, and it was going to be a high-scoring affair. It was anything but that. The game was kind of boring to me until that last 7, 6, and 5 minutes. And I was really wanting the Kansas City Chiefs to win for Andy Reid. Victory number 222. But, man, I got so worked into a shoot, I'm not going to watch all the preamble next year. I'm just going to go get my work in, get my workout in, and watch the Super Bowl itself. Congratulations, Kansas City Chiefs. It was a hell of a season. Congrats to Patrick Mahomes, MVP. Everybody in that organization chipped in to win that title, and that's the bottom line because I said so. Hey, I'm coming back with my guest, Jerry the King Lawler, here on the Steve Austin Show. We're talking all things pro wrestling. And before I forget, check out next week's show. I've got deathmatch wrestler who's also a scientific wrestler and a damn good worker, Ricky Shane Page, on the podcast next week. Do not miss that conversation. We'll get into the mind and talk to Ricky Shane Page, and I'll ask him some of these risk and everything else that goes into the deathmatch scene. Not my cup of tea. Like I told Ricky Shane, hell, I got dropped on my head one time, damn near got killed. And watching what these guys do is absolutely incredible. Check out that conversation next week here on the Steve Austin Show. Let's kick it off. Jerry the King Lawler, one of the greats of all time, one of my favorites of all time, right here, right now. Hell, I'm Skyping with the King, Jerry Lawler, one of my favorite pro wrestlers of all time. And we're looking at each other on computer screens. He's doing his hair. Nobody touched up his makeup.
No, I didn't know we were going to be on camera.
The King just figured out how to work his video scope over there. Scotty, I'm honored that I could be talking to you on this illustrious day. Technology is a son of a gun, isn't it?
Isn't it awesome? It is so awesome. I just finished the first half of my podcast just a few minutes ago. I had Drew McIntyre on with me today.
Hey, tell me, what do you think about Drew McIntyre?
I really like him. I like him even more after talking to him. I hadn't even really been around him, just, doing commentary on his matches and stuff recently. And then Monday night, he had this great interaction with Randy Orton. So after the show was over, we're back at the TV hotel, and we're getting some food down at the bar there. They stayed open late for everybody. And Drew was there, and he came up to me, and I've never really even spoken to him that much backstage or anything. And then he came up to me, and he had a question. He said, well, I've been listening to your podcast. And I said, really? And I was surprised. I was taken back. He said, oh, yeah, I love it. And I had a question about Bill Dundee. And he said, is he really Scottish or is he Australian? He said, I've always wanted to know. And so anyway, I told him the background of Bill, how, of course, Bill was actually from Scotland. And he was one of those guys, I think he said when he was 12 years old, he ran away from home with the circus. The circus came through town, and Bill ran away from home, went with the circus, and the circus traveled from Scotland down to Ireland, and then from there over to Australia. And that's where Bill got into wrestling. And so he stayed in Australia until he came to the States in 1976. And so he always claimed, well, he would tell anybody that actually wanted to know that he was really from Scotland, but he just claimed to be Australian because he came over with George Barnes, and they called themselves the Australians. And so, and Drew was really interested to hear that story. And then he also asked me about he said, man, I never knew that you were going to have a match with Elvis. And then he said, I was really interested. So it was cool to know that somebody out there like Drew was listening to the podcast and was really interested in it. So, but then when we had him on today, found out a lot about his background, how he just grew up amazing. He said, I just was a big mark. And he said, and mentioned you, of course. And he said, Hulk Hogan, then Stone Cold Steve Austin. And he said, I was a huge Bret the Hitman Hart fan. And that's what he said, too. He said, oh, I used to hate you, King, when you said those bad things about Bret's parents and everything. And he said, I just wanted him to beat you so bad. But anyway, he loves the business. He really does. And he's excited to be where he is right now.
So as far as people that you think they should push, should they give this – I mean, they've been pushing him, but full green light with this guy? Can he go all the way? Can he carry the company? Can he be the guy?
I think he could be the guy. And we all know that they've been looking for somebody since John Cena, and we've tried so hard with Roman Reigns. And of course Roman's over big. Silver's probably as good as anybody that they've pushed in that to that extent. But I still think there's room for. He's not a John Cena. He's not a Stone Cold Steve Austin. He's not a Rock yet. And they're looking for that type of personality. And I really think just in being around him and watching, I mean, he looks fantastic. I really think that he could be the guy. And then that's another thing he was saying. They're for the first time, they're giving him an opportunity to be himself. And that's the one thing now that Paul Heyman is sort of in charge of Raw. It's so much not the characters are not being so predetermined by the writers or creative. They're giving the guys a chance to be themselves, just like you were at the time. Back when you became Stone Cold Steve Austin, nobody was in there telling you, "Oh no, this is how you got to be." I mean, you were yourself. You were given that opportunity, and you took it.
Yeah, when you got someone micromanaging and telling you every single thing to do, you kind of turn into a robot, and you think, "Oh man, am I doing this right? Am I doing this wrong? Am I screwing this up?" You're too much in your head. And I'll never forget. I was going back. I've been looking at some old stuff from USWA. And I'll never forget, just kind of watching some of those television tapings that we did there in Memphis. Golly, man, that was a learning experience. And there were so many veterans, and you're nervous as a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs. But, you get a chance to go out there and learn to do it. And you're going to mess up, and then you're going to come back and either get scolded or critiqued by the veterans. But you got to learn. And, hell, it took me – I was no overnight success. It took me a long time to find out who I was. And, Dutch would give me the Stunning Steve name, but I was never a character or a gimmick a defined character until I came up with the Stone Cold thing. And, it took me several months to grow into that. When Drew McIntyre was telling you about Stone Cold or, Hulk Hogan, all the names, Bret Hart, the names that he listed, and he talked about how you made him mad and talking about Bret Hart's mother and father. But did he go back? Because I'm not blowing smoke up your ass, but you're one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. You had this classic brawling style. And in my opinion, wouldn't you consider yourself, or wouldn't you consider yourself more of a brawler than a scientific wrestler?
Oh my gosh, without a doubt. Yeah, I never knew crap about wrestling.
Right, but that's what I loved about it.
And today is even more distinct from what it was back in my day or your day, whatever. I mean, I actually said on air the other day, I said somebody did some kind of flip. I'm flopping off the top rope or diving in triple somersault, and I said, man, I don't know what that move's called, but I bet it's hard to pronounce. And it's just like, And I mean, I've worked a little bit with Mauro Ranallo, who does NXT, and oh my gosh, he comes up and he knows these crazy names of all of these moves today that I think you and I would never have dreamt of, much less attempted to try to do some of that stuff. No, I was definitely a walker and a talker and a brawler.
But did he recognize how big of a star you were? Because a lot of people, especially newer generation, know you from your commentary, which, you're in the Hall of Fame for many reasons. And you're always had an A1 promo, and you're a great, color guy. And you've entertained millions of people and generations of people that watch WWE. But sometimes I think you get lost in the mix from being one of the great. I was telling someone this the other day. People always say, "Hey, who's the greatest promo of all time?" And I'll give you this 3 or 4 or 5 person list. I told someone the other day, I said, Jerry Lawler's on everybody's list if you know anything about wrestling. And then, but going back to your body of work, the way you carried that entire territory, some of those guys need to go back and watch some of your work, because I think there's a lot to be learned from that, especially just with everybody trying to go faster and faster and faster and doing moves that are even harder to pronounce than what the move is. Everybody's moving so fast. I think it'd be refreshing for some people to go back and just to watch your right hands, watch the way you worked, and not just you, but some of those other guys from different generations. And I had Taker over here several months ago, and he was talking about less is more. And I don't think that at the pace that everybody's going, you can do any more than what you're doing. I'm rambling. My point was, you was a hell of a hand in that damn ring, and you're one of my favorite workers just because of the style with which you worked.
Well, you know what? And I appreciate that. I thank you. But I think you and I probably were in the same boat at the time. We didn't even think about what our style was or anything. We just went out there and had our match and tried our best. The only thing that was always in the back of my mind was, let's get these people excited. Let's get them into the match and let's tell a story. And that's all I thought about. I didn't think about what style am I doing. But you know what? I had a conversation similar to what we're having right now a couple of weeks ago in catering with Bruce Pritchard. And we started talking about, mentioned you, and we mentioned, the different guys from what Drew McIntyre, the guys that are there now, what they grew up watching. And and Bruce said, and of course, Bruce, he's in charge of SmackDown now. So he's the big guy. And I was talking to him about, is there a way to get these guys to slow down a little bit and tell a story rather than just make the match 100% moves, throughout the match? And he said, King, I wish there was, but he said, this is what wrestling has become, and there's nothing we can do about it. He said, I don't think there's a way to go back now. He said, it's just evolved into this, and he didn't blame, he just credited almost, the internet, the dirt sheet writers, and the guys that put over the Lucha Libre wrestling and the New Japan wrestling and all of that kind of stuff to making the business evolve into what I think half of those guys now, if you went back and showed them our style of matches, they would probably think it was boring. They would just, I don't know.
Man, I can see, kind of that point, because I was watching some of my stuff because I was interviewing someone over here, and I can watch my stuff and be very critical of some of the things that I did,
Me too, for sure.
But I was watching a lot of your stuff and, some of those matches that you had with Dundee. And I'm like, man, that classic style should always be relevant. And hey, man, I know everybody's going fast, but not everybody can go fast. And it was one thing when the cruiserweights, quote unquote, started doing it. But then all of a sudden you've got these big guys that are working at the same pace. And
Crazy.
I don't want to name any names, but some of the biggest guys up there physically are working so fast that their size is no longer a factor in who and what they are.
Right. You're exactly right.
Dude, they're killing themselves for no reason.
I'm calling the matches and I'm thinking, what on earth are these guys doing? Why do they need to do that type of work? They don't need it. They, like you said, rely on what you got, what God gave you, your size and physical ability. You don't need to go out there and be an aerialist. It's and that's what I think is lost. We used to tell a story in a match. You can go back and look at your history of, some of the, just basically look at your history with stuff you did with Vince. That was a week to week story that people could get invested in. People could follow what is Vince going to do to piss Steve off this week? And how is Steve going to get the best of Vince McMahon? You followed that. You got invested in that. Now the matches are just watching moves one after another. It's whoa, wow, oh, this is awesome, whoa, and it's not a story. It may be entertaining to the fans nowadays, but there's no story in the matches anymore. It's just one move after another.
Man, when I'm not going to name any names, I'll get off of it right now, but I seen this one huge human being jump off the top turnbuckle a while back, and I'm thinking, man, if I was that big and someone suggested that I come off the top turnbuckle, because Jerry, from everything that you've done, I've seen you take some pretty good bumps from working with Joe Ledoux, going to that wooden table. So I've seen you take, but nothing crazy, but I've seen you take some bumps. But to have these physical gifts Bruiser Brody, how many crazy, outlandish bumps did Bruiser Brody ever take?
You're right. I worked with Bruiser Brody several different times, and I was shocked myself to see him even take a flat back bump. I was surprised when he went to one knee. And I swear to God, I remember working a match with Dick the Bruiser back in the day. And for him to go to one knee was unheard of almost. You know, he beat on him and beat on him. And finally, you got him down to one knee and you felt like, oh, my gosh, what an accomplishment. And the fans realized that, too.
So I won't talk about current talent anymore, but I made that Bruiser Brody reference. You talk about Dick the Bruiser. You know, God dang, and those guys were over. Yeah,
they were.
And they'd be over today.
And it meant more to the fans back then if you could get Dick the Bruiser down to one knee than it did if you got a 400-pound guy jumping off the top turnbuckle.
Yeah.
It just and I don't know how to get back to that. I don't know. You know, one thing you mentioned, these guys should go back and watch. I was really flattered a few weeks ago. Becky Lynch, you know, the man. I mean, she's the top female worker there in the WWE right now. And I don't know Becky well or anything. You know, I say hi every time I see her and that sort of passing in the back. But all of a sudden she came up to me a few weeks ago and she said, King, I've been binge watching Jerry Lawler matches on YouTube. And I went, you've been doing what? She said, oh, yeah. She said, Vince McMahon told me that I need to throw a better punch. And I've heard that there's nobody that throws a punch like you. And she said, I've just been binge watching you and your punches. And she said, I really think it's helped me. And sure enough, that night, I think she hit Charlotte Flair or somebody with just a boom with the right hand. And then she put out on a tweet the next day, she said that punch came all the way from Memphis. And you know, so some of the talent do watch some of our stuff, I think.
Man, if I asked you this on the last podcast, because we've talked a couple of times and we've had conversations at a couple of arenas here and there whenever we see each other, but where did you model that right hand from? I know you could throw both of them, but that trademark one right between the eyes and that looping one that would just catch a guy right on the chin.
You know, I've been asked that question a lot, and I just have to, I think back, and I never really worked out and had anybody train me. I had, and I sort of blame it or not blame it. I sort of credit my artistic ability. You know, they say that somebody. I mean, I've had many people come up to me and say, "Man, can you teach me how to draw?" And I say, that's not something that you can teach. I think you can learn how to draw yourself if you have that ability. And they've said, I've looked it up before, and they say that artistic ability is an extraordinary coordination between your eye and your hand. And you can look at something and with your hand be able to, and a pencil, and be able to draw exactly what your eye is seeing. And most people don't have that coordination, that much coordination between their hands. I mean, I've seen people sit down with like I'm looking at you right now, and they could be trying to draw your face on there and, you know, wind up doing a smiley face. You know, they can't just a round thing and two eyes and a smiley face, you know. But if you have that coordination, I mean, I can look at the detail of your eye and then sketch it out and make it look like your eye looks to my eyes. And I think that ability had helped me in throwing not a perfect punch, but as good a punch as I do throw. And I always, everything that I learned in wrestling, I learned from watching other people, and I could watch how they would do stuff. And I guess with that coordination, watching it closely, I was just able to do it. And the person that I love to watch throw punches, and now I still go back and I know I've had to pattern myself after him, was Jackie Fargo. Fabulous Jackie Fargo. He was the guy that, you know, and he was my mentor. He was the guy I really looked up to. And I go back and there's some great matches on YouTube of me and Jackie Fargo. And you watch his punches, and they put mine to shame. I mean, he was, to me, the best.
I'm going to go back and watch some of those. Hey, I had some commentary questions for you, because all of a sudden I turn the TV on and I DVR all the shows. I don't get a chance to watch them all the time. Right. But if someone tells me, hey, man, you got to watch this, I'll go back and watch it. If somebody calls me, asks me for some advice or a tip, I'll watch it. All of a sudden, hell, you're back on the air doing commentary.
Right.
When did you start back?
Oh, gosh, I've been back now since Oh, way before Christmas. I think I started back in November, something like that, or maybe the end of October. Yeah, I just got a call. I'd been off the air for a long time, and I just got a call from Kevin Dunn one day. And what precipitated it, and what helped me out on the deal was when they did the deal with Fox, and Fox decided that they were going to go on Friday nights with the show. And everybody knew, this is $1 billion contract. Can you imagine that, Steve? $1 billion, $1 billion in the wrestling business that they paid for 5 years of the rights to SmackDown. So that immediately, in the minds of, I think, everybody, that was going to become the number one show of WWE. And of course, it's on network, regular, you don't have to have cable. And so many people have access to watching now SmackDown more than they do Raw. So that they considered that their number one show. And so they decided that they were going to put Michael Cole and Corey Graves they were going to make the trip and go to SmackDown. They were the number one team on Raw. So they were going to switch them over to SmackDown because that's going to be the most watched show. And, they just said, I think we mentioned the fact that Paul Heyman, they did sort of put Paul Heyman in charge of Raw, and he had an announced team in mind that he wanted to use on Raw, and it didn't include me. It was basically three people that were kind of, had not had much experience, may have been on NXT or may have been on Main Event or something like that. And I think the decision was made that, man, you got to have one person that's had some experience. You can't just throw three kind of rookies, so to speak, out on the number one. Still Raw is the number one show, because it has been for so many years, and it still is, even with SmackDown there, still the number one show. And they just came to the decision that they couldn't throw three rookies out there without some. And Kevin Dunn said what we needed was a star. He's trying to put me over, but anyway, he said we need somebody to kind of anchor that broadcast with the younger people. And so they called me up, and that's how it got going again.
Yeah, but I agree with that. Just because, with all due respect to the rookies, if I'm changing channels and all of a sudden I hear the voice of Jerry the King Lawler, that's a voice that I came up with, but also helped get me over, and I'm used to hearing. The same thing, right. With Michael Cole over there. But so a lot of people just. You see the visual, but when okay, I'm home here. This is Jerry Lawler, Ian Mayer, talking about these guys. How was it going back after being gone for so long? And, the business has exponentially kept speeding up, as we talked about earlier in the podcast. So how was it going back? Because when I go back, dude, there's 6 times as many trucks as there used to be. And it was a big deal way back in the day.
Sure, absolutely.
But, so how was it coming back to see all these fresh faces? I'm sure the majority of which maybe you did not know.
You're exactly right. And that was the biggest difference. The one thing, though, the one thing that was sort of the constant was almost everybody with the backstage crew was still there. Those people haven't changed. So many of those people are there. And I always, in the past, I started back when JR and I were doing broadcasts together. I would dress or change clothes, basically, put on whatever shirt I was going to wear was all that my dressing was. But since JR was head of talent relations at the time, I would just dress in the talent relations room. I didn't need much room. I just set my briefcase down in my bag, change shirts. But so even after JR left, I was still always dressed in talent relations. And of course, then Mark Carrano came along, and Mark is still there. And so when I came back, I just went right back into the talent relations dressing room, and that's where I spend most of my day. So Mark and I have been good buddies since, 20 years or something like that. So that part hadn't changed, but going out and kind of getting acquainted with the new talent has changed a little bit. And then, of course, I was put on the air next with Vic Joseph, who I had never met. It's funny. I showed up to do Raw one night, the first night that I was back on there. I'd never even met Vic Joseph. I met him the first time 1 hour before we went on there to do the live show. And another kid, Dio Madden, that was, I think he was a wrestler in NXT, and they were trying him out as another color guy. So we had this 3-man booth all of a sudden, and we went on the air, and I hadn't even met those other two before in my life. So it was to me, though, just going back on there, it was just like getting back on a bike, riding again. It was, I felt, I didn't feel ill at ease or anything. I did have a couple of times, like I know one of the first couple of weeks I was back on there, they had the NXT invasion. Where all the NXT wrestlers started coming up and, jumping in the ring on the guys. And I'll never forget, as soon as they jumped in the ring, of course, our mics were open, and so I couldn't really say anything. So I punch Vic next to me, and I looked at him, and he looked over at me, and I mouthed it. I said, "Don't ask me anything about these guys," because I didn't know any of them. And he could tell what I was saying. And fortunately, he knew all the NXT guys because that's where he was from. And so he picked up the ball for me there because it could have been really embarrassing. But that's the biggest thing is not really knowing a lot of the new guys. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I've been in the business 50 years. I don't watch a lot of wrestling. When I wasn't on the air every week, I'm not going to sit around and watch NXT and main event and stuff like that all the time. I'm like you. I'll go back and watch some stuff on YouTube or on the WWE Network, some of the old stuff. But so I was not. That's the thing that's been the kind of tough on me was keeping up with the new talent and getting acquainted with the new talent. But after that, it's been okay.
The Steve Austin Show. The Steve Austin Show.
Average 8 hours of sleep per night? Check. Eat a quality plant-based diet? Check. Exercise 4 or more times per week? Check. Basically, you're doing everything right to ensure you live a long life. Isn't it time you be financially rewarded for your commitment to a healthy lifestyle? Introducing Health IQ. Health IQ uses science and data to secure lower rates for people like you on their life insurance. If you're a runner or a cyclist, or if you're into CrossFit or another type of athlete, even a committed weekend warrior. If you're a vegetarian or vegan, then you deserve to be rewarded for your hard work with more affordable life insurance rates. Health IQ can save you up to 41% because physically active people have significantly lower risk for heart disease, cancer, and diabetes. And Health IQ is not just a lead generator. They take the customer through the entire process of applying, and the policy is underwritten by one of our top insurance partners. But these savings are exclusive to Health IQ. You won't find them anywhere else, and you must qualify to get a special rate. To see if you qualify, go to healthiq.com/Steve to take the proprietary Health IQ quiz. Depending upon your score, as well as other related qualifying factors, you can save up to 41% on your life insurance premiums compared to other providers. Again, that's healthiq.com/Steve to let them know we sent you and start the process with the Health IQ quiz. There's no commitment, and you'll learn even more about potential opportunities to be rewarded for your commitment to living healthy. One more time, that's healthiq.com/Steve.
This is the Steve Austin Show.
Our mutual good friend Jim Ross used to always do a truckload of homework or prep work. I mean, just notes and attention to detail. And to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you're the kind of guy that showed up with some doodles on a piece of paper and just fly by the seat of your pants. Is that correct?
That is the perfect description. Fly by the seat of my pants. And I've always told everybody, and I think I've told you before, I mean, you and I could sit down and call a match, and the people sitting at home would be thinking, God, these guys are great, because the way I always looked at it with Jim Ross and even with Michael Cole, and because I was a fan before I even got to be a wrestler, I looked at it as like I'm sitting on my sofa at home in my den, and my next door neighbor, Jim Ross, is sitting here with me, and we're watching wrestling on TV, and we're talking about it.
Right.
We're just saying what we would say if we were just watching a show. And that's sort of the way I always looked at it. But JR was different. JR, like you said, he knew all the statistics. I used to tell him, JR could probably tell you where Hidden Valley Ranch is. He knows everything. He'd tell you Willie Nelson's middle name. And that made it so easy for me because he was so well prepared. And I literally could show up 5 minutes before we went on the air and go out there and nobody would know the difference. I mean, because like it said, I somehow that's worked for me, flying by the seat of my pants. And the new kid, Vic Joseph, he's been great. He reminds me so much of Michael Cole. He's just and Michael was awesome too. So I've been blessed to work with some good play-by-play guys over the years. But I've always felt like it doesn't matter who the play-by-play guy is. I'm going to be me, and I'm going to say the stuff that just comes into my head without any preparation, and somehow that's worked for me over the years.
Who are some of your favorite announcers? Just because, coming up from the Tennessee territory, USWA, Lance Russell.
Oh, man.
I mean, God dang it. I mean, and it was kind of the barometer of the show, or the conscience of the show. I mean, whether, you're talking about a good guy, the way he talked, or if a heel did something despicable, and you guys had such good chemistry. Now, you were working as the top guy, and he was working as a commentator, so you weren't necessarily a team. And then you would team up with Jim Ross, and you've worked with Michael Cole. But going back to the heydays of Gordon Soley, and I know I'm forgetting some Minnesota, some territory guys, but who were some of your favorite guys to listen to as a fan of the business, or someone of your knowledge?
Well, as a fan of the business, Lance Russell and Dave Brown were the only, back in the territory days. And I hear this all the time, especially like I go and do a Comic-Con or be out in the public or something like that. And I hear from young people, they say, oh, man, you and JR were the voice of my childhood. If I've heard that at one time, I've heard it 1,000 times. Well, and that's very understandable, because we were basically the only wrestling announcers that they heard all throughout their childhood as they were growing up. And in my case, and probably in your case, somebody different, but as I was growing up, Lance Russell and Dave Brown were on every Saturday morning on Memphis TV, and that's the only wrestling we saw. Everything was regionalized. Everything was in that was our territory. We didn't see Bill Watts doing commentary with down in the Mid-South with JR at the time. We didn't see Gordon Soley until it came on cable in the 80s. But as a kid growing up, Lance and Dave, and I, without thinking, I probably kind of fed off of what they did, because they were the classic guys of looked like two buddies sitting there watching a wrestling show. Neither one of them were. I mean, Lance Russell was the program director of the TV station. He wasn't even an on-air personality. He just the only on-air stuff that Lance did was the wrestling show. Dave Brown was the weather guy, and he just showed up on Saturday morning. And he and Lance were good friends, and they sat down and did the wrestling show.
And man, with all due respect to Dave Brown, because I was there, coming through as a greenhorn, and he was there. But Lance was this guy.
Yeah,
I know you're a big music guy. For me, it'd be like the equivalent of a Stevie Ray Vaughan who never got lost on a guitar. Lance Russell had the gift of this just easy drawl, telling a story that was seamless. And if he was interviewing a guy that couldn't talk, he'd ask him a question, kind of help him answer it, and get him over and get him out, come facilitate the next guy. He was just so seamless. It was unbelievable. One of the great storytellers in the history of the business.
Well, I'll tell people a lot of times, because, Memphis wrestling, that 90-minute show every Saturday morning, with Lance, it went from the 60s all the way to the end of the middle of the 90s. And I tell everybody who come up to me and said, oh, man, you made Memphis wrestling. You're this and you're that. And I said, no, what made Memphis wrestling was Lance Russell and Dave Brown, because they were there. They were the constant. They were like you said. You knew you were going to recognize that voice, and no matter what wrestlers came and went, Lance and Dave were always there. And to me, they made Memphis wrestling. They were the guys, and to me, the best. And you tell this, and there'll be people listening out there to your podcast right now that, who the hell is Lance Russell and Dave Brown? Because they may have grown up in Minneapolis or up in New York or something, never even heard of these guys. But the people in our Mid-South area, Tennessee, Kentucky, Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, they were wrestling to me.
Hey, what was it like for you when you transitioned from a top guy in the territories to going to work in New York and then transitioning to a commentator?
Oh, I hated it.
Why? Just because you couldn't be in the ring, or he wanted you to move behind the microphone rather than be in the ring?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's why for so many years I would always wear my tights out to the, I rather wore my tights and outfit out to the ring. And people finally, after years of doing that, people say, why does King wear wrestling tights when he's an announcer? But I just, because I didn't, even back when we were talking about like watching Lance and Dave every week, I knew they were there and I was a fan of them, but I never one time thought about being an announcer. I just thought about being a wrestler. And when I got to, when I got up to New York, but Vince helped me out on that. And the fact that he said, we're still going to use you. And they did from time to time use me in the wrestling role, but not as full time. But he convinced me that, if you remember, the guy's place that I took was Macho Man Randy Savage. I mean, when he jumped the ship and went over, so he was already using some top guys as color men, and so that's how he made me accept it a little more. It said, he just said, I felt like, you're taking the place of Randy Savage here when he jumped ship to WCW. So it made it a little more palatable. But everybody asked me, how much do you love it? And I said, I never loved it. It was always the wrestling that I loved.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Even to this day.
Even to this day, sure.
So how are you? Because
I just this past Saturday I won the CWA Arkansas State Championship in Little Rock, Arkansas, in front of a sold-out crowd over there, over some kid named Matt Riviera, and at 70 years old. So anyway, I still love to do it.
Congratulations, champ!
And who came over there and sat ringside and did commentary? Dave Brown.
I'll be damned.
Dave Brown was there, and Jerry Calhoun jumped in the ring and counted 1, 2, 3 for me to win the match.
I was going to ask you, it's in my notes here, what in the hell happened to Jerry Calhoun? So he's doing fine.
Oh, he's doing fine. He worked for all those years for Federal Express in Memphis. That was a real job, and refereed for us basically on the side every Monday night and every Saturday morning, and some trips around on the weekend. But he worked for Federal Express for 30-something years, retired from there, and now he plays golf every single day of his life. Every day. I don't care if it's winter time or whatever. He's out on the golf course every day. And anytime we do wrestling shows, he's there for us.
Man, that guy was a hell of a referee.
He was. And there's another guy who it just, it was something about the Memphis territory and being around the different talent that was there. I got Jerry Calhoun into refereeing because he was my brother-in-law by marriage.
Really?
I was married to a girl, and Jerry Calhoun was married to my wife's sister. And so we were just at dinner one night, and I said, man, you need to come down and referee some matches for us. And he said, okay. And so that's how it started out. And but I can honestly say he was good from the get-go. He was really good. He's been he's been in a lot more famous matches in Memphis than I have. He's been in every big match.
Well, hey,
match.
But dude, on that note, some of the angles you guys work with, where you're drawing that referee or the heel's drawing that referee, there's some business going on with either a foreign object, that guy's taking care of business as far as some color. I mean, man, he could, or taking a bump, someone pulls him back up. I mean, there's great referees, there's good referees, and there's referees. I mean, just like the boys, he was a great referee.
Yeah, he really was, and still is to this day.
There's an art to and it's up to the boys as well, but not putting the heat on the ref, but the referee also not taking that heat.
Right.
And
exactly right.
Knowing how to manipulate the situation. So hey, man, this ain't on me, because referee got to stay over just like everybody else.
Yep. And it was so gratifying. We went over this past Saturday, Little Rock, Arkansas, sold out place. They sold VIP admission where the people could come in and get their picture made 2 hours early before the matches. And they sold all they could. They sold 350 VIP tickets where the people could come in, and then they had the opportunity to get the picture made with you, buy a picture, of course. And so it was great to sit there and watch Calhoun and Dave Brown. I went out and had them some 8x10s made up. And they said, what's that for? And they said, we're doing a meet and greet. You guys are like your special guests on the show. So to sit there and watching people buying their picture and them autographing it was really Calhoun just kept looking at me. Every time somebody would buy a picture of him and he signed it, he'd look at me and go, what the heck? I can't believe this. But it was fun that those guys were still out there and still included, you know.
Hey, I've heard a few nightmare stories from a real good friend of mine that used to commentate at WWE. And a lot of times you can see the earphones that I'm wearing, and you guys are wearing headphones out there. And a lot of times there's someone in your ear giving you instruction. How do you take to that? Because my buddy, sometimes he'd really get his ass chewed out on live television. How did you deal with that? And were you down with it, or did you need that instruction, or that's what the man wants?
You know what? I can say with all honesty, I've been very blessed. And I guarantee you one person that will tell you this for a fact is good old JR. I don't know what it was with, and the person you're talking about probably is Vince. I mean, you know, Vince McMahon is at every TV show, and he's in the back, and he's got a set of headphones on, and Vince has a row of buttons in front of him, and he can punch a button, and he can talk to anybody. He can talk to the director, he can talk to the cameraman, he can talk to the referee, he can talk to any one of the three announcers at any given time, or so he has a huge input throughout the entire show. And yeah, I've been in a lot of situations where my partner would really get an earful if he said something that didn't please Vince. I, on the other hand, over all these years, Steve, it's unbelievable. Vince has never yelled at me one time. I would go through, I don't know, weeks and weeks of shows where I didn't even hear Vince say a word to me. And we'd be like in break 15, and JR would cut our microphones off, and he says, "Is he wearing you out tonight?" And I said, "I haven't even heard from him." He said, "Holy Jesus, he's killing me." And so, but now, now that I'm back on there just this past week, like I said, all Vince will do very occasionally is he will see something. And, because Vince, if you remember, Vince, heck, right before he started working with you, Vince was the play-by-play guy on all the shows. And I loved, when I first started, I was working with Vince as I was doing the color, and Vince was the play-by-play guy. I loved working with Vince. He was an awesome color. I mean, he was an awesome play-by-play guy. He really got it, and I loved working with him. And so that's still in the back of his mind. And when he's watching a show, he sees something, and if it's something that he would just comes to him that he would say, he will punch a button and he will suggest, something for me to say on the show. But he doesn't do it very often, because a lot of times, and I know JR used to tell Vince this, a lot of times the match is going so fast and furious, and if Vince sees something, by the time he sees it and thinks of it in his head and then pushes the button and tells you what to say, the moment's gone. And
right.
It's too late to say it, right? And he realizes that. And so that doesn't happen to me. But with I know that with they brought in at one time, they brought in Mick Foley. And Mick Foley was going to going to be part of the announce crew, and apparently Vince just really got on his case on the shows, and there's some people that can tell you, like Michael Cole. I've heard Vince scream at him. JR, I've heard Vince scream at him, and both those guys know the situation. They realize it's the heat of the moment. They let it roll off their back, which is hard to do when you're on live TV, and they let it roll off, but. Poor Mick, he could not take it. He did it a few weeks, and he said, "Man, I can't take being talked to like this." So,
I'm glad you said that you enjoyed working with Vince, because I always like listening to the guy.
Yes.
Because I liked his enthusiasm. And one of the best things I liked about Vince was, I mean, he really knew how to put a guy over, whether he worked a heel or baby, and he ultimately knows exactly where the story is going.
Oh, sure.
You might have had a production meeting, but Vince knows, because he's the guy. So that's one of the things I enjoyed about Vince. Whose idea was it for you to do commentary on your own matches? I think you only had like one or two of them.
Yeah, no, I did 2 or 3 of them where
it was ridiculous, but it was masterfully done. I don't think anybody could have did it like you did it. Whose idea was that?
I think it was Vince's. I think it was Vince's. And I can say this too. I mean, he's told me, and I really am honored. Vince is just a big fan of my commentating, and he has been from the get-go. He loved the little bit of the humor and stuff that I would inject in there, and that was definitely his idea to go ahead. He said, "King, we're like King." Commentators during his own match, and I went, okay. So, and I think that came from I was maybe one of the first ones that started having a microphone, a live mic, as I was walking down to the ring, and I would just start, insulting all the different fans. I would stop and insult the different fans on the way to the ring, and Vince loved that. And so then I guess he got the idea, said, "Hell, let's take it a step further, insult the fans, and then go in the ring and insult your opponent while you're wrestling him."
I loved it. Think about, I believe one of the matches I watched, I think it was a guy named Al Jackson, and you're sitting there talking to him, and the guy was a pro boxer, record of 35-0 with 31 knockouts. And of course, you remind him this isn't a boxing match. You go to shake his hand, you kick him in the gut. you introduce him to Mr. Turnbuckle. It was priceless. And then you give him a good comeback.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Still with the mic, right?
Yeah. Hey, as a commentator, like how did you find out, or where did you decide to where your moral compass was? Did you like being a heel or just a baby? What's your comfort zone? How's that come about?
No, definitely love being a heel. Oh my gosh, that was so much fun. And that's one of the things that has changed about the business. And I think it's come along with the fact that, as we've evolved from pro wrestling to sports entertainment. And now you see, the WWE superstars are on, of course, with guys like yourself becoming movie stars and The Rock becoming movie stars, and John Cena, Vince, and that was his goal in life. And he's accomplished that, is to make the wrestling stars or the superstars on the same level with other entertainment stars. And he's done that. And I think that, one of the things that has evolved about that is, in the past, pro wrestling, you had to have a heel and a baby face. And I think that Vince thought, I think is one of his beliefs, was that in real life, if we're going to make these superstars on the same level as other movie stars and entertainment stars, we don't need to go that far to make them appear. I don't know. I'm probably saying this wrong, but they don't have to go out of their way to, I think, get heat. In other words, do the old time getting heat of being heels and baby faces. And it was like, for a while, we kind of suffered through it. I think we're there now, but everybody was sort of vanilla. Everybody was sort of the same, it was like cookie cutter personalities, and nobody could get. And especially we talked about Calhoun. Oh, they're to a period. You can't use the referee to get heat. And as a matter of fact, you don't really need to get heat. We'll let the people decide if they like you or not. You don't need to go out there and do anything to get heat, which I see you shaking your head. And to me and you, that's probably the major change in the business as we know it. Because to me, when growing up, the whole philosophy was you got a heel and a baby face, and the baby face was better, and the heel could only win by cheating. And that was the thing that came along where Vince says, we don't cheat. We don't need to cheat. And that's been a major thing. But that's why I love being a heel announcer and all of the stuff you could get away with there. But nowadays it's become like it's almost like they don't really want a completely heel announcer like we used to have. But I'm trying to bring it back a little bit, because that's the only thing that's fun. I've always thought that if you got two guys doing the same thing, you don't need one of them. So it's like I think that was why it was so good with JR and with Vince, the heel playing the devil's advocate and being for the bad guys. But nowadays, sometimes there's not bad guys to be for. They're two guys that are just you got to figure it out.
Man, I'm a big believer in someone being able to break the rules. And by the same token, normally it's the heel. But at an opportune moment in that match, when the baby breaks the rules, hey,
sure.
Well, he had it coming. So, yeah, it's magnified.
Yes, absolutely. That was the great thing about Stone Cold Steve Austin, the Rattlesnake. They couldn't wait to see you break the rules because, the heel had it coming, and there was nobody better at breaking the rules than Stone Cold.
Hey, here's a quick story. I got really hot there towards the beginning when I kind of got on a roll. I'd go out there and I'd be working with Triple H. He might have still been Hunter or Helmsley. And I'm trying to go out there and give them a good 15, 20-minute main event. But they didn't want to see me get shined up. They just wanted to see me just do my shortcuts, and that's what me and Triple H would go out there and do. If I grabbed a hammerlock and he reversed and got behind me, I'd throw an elbow. If we got into a corner on a break, I'd thumb him in the eyes. I mean, it was just, or I'd mule kick him between the legs. When the referee was separating, it was stuff like that. But back to you. As an announcer, you've called some of the biggest matches that there's been in the time that you've been calling matches. There's been some classics. Have you ever got lost in a moment as a fan, or is the focus always on calling a match for the fans? I mean, do you get caught up in it to just get totally sidetracked, or are you trying to push an agenda or a narrative?
I definitely do get caught up in it, but that's not in my mind that I'm calling it for the fans. I get caught up in it in the fact that I'm going back to what I was saying before. It's like I'm just watching the match, and if I get caught up and I'm really getting into the match, I'll say what I would really say, and I'm not saying that I'm thinking about what the fans want to hear me say. And I think that was the great thing about JR. I'll go now. It's so funny. If you look on social media now, anything that happens, people are they're putting up like the latest thing was this big fight in the Kansas and Kansas State basketball game. Immediately after that fight took place, boom, that's all of a sudden it's up on social media, and there's somebody has put mine and JR's voiceover behind it. Where I say, oh, my God, he's dead. That's it. He's dead. And JR said, my God, he's broken in half. It killed him and all this kind of stuff. And JR, I've noticed a lot of these a lot of the commentary where JR is so, that's the one they put up on these memes, is he's so into it when he would call, you son of a bitch. And it was just like he wasn't on the air. And that's what was so great about it. I think when you can get that invested and that involved in calling the match and say stuff that people wouldn't think you would say on the air, that's the best. That's when they like it the most.
Hey, you've probably watched a lot of your matches, and maybe you went back to critique them or see maybe what you could learn from a match. Or I would. Have you ever gone and watched a match and listened to your commentary and said, I crossed the line there, I could have done this better? Or do you critique your own performance as a commentator?
No, never. I really don't. I was thinking about this the other day too. I get asked sometimes, like questions like, what do you want your legacy to be? And I swear to God, I have never thought of myself in any kind of way like that. Or I've never gone, honestly, I just heard you say you do, but I have never gone back and watched any of my matches, like to say, try to learn anything. I mean, to see what I did wrong or anything. I just don't do that. I swear I've always looked at this business from the time I got into it, I swear, Steve, just as a job. And it was like every day I went to work. And once I finished that match, it was like the next day I'm going back to work, but it's a different day and it's a different match. And I forget about yesterday. And sometimes people will remind me of stuff. Like when you reminded me of the fact that I did my own commentary and matches, I never think about that until somebody would remind me of it. It's just I I never looked at even big matches in my career. I don't go back and watch them or think about that kind of stuff. It's always day to day. Go in, do the job, try to do the best you can, and forget about it. I've heard that talked about Major League Baseball pitchers. They said pitchers got to have the shortest memory because they go out there and all of a sudden give up a grand slam home run, but then they're still in the game and they got to start pitching the next pitch. And I swear I think that's the way I looked at it. Not intentionally. I wasn't doing it even knowingly that I was doing it, but that's the way I always looked at this business. I just went in there and did my job that day, tried to do it as best I could, and I'd forget about it the next day.
Sometimes I guess I wouldn't really watch matches to critique myself, but I'd watch the matches if they had them on the TV the next day because the pay-per-view on Sunday, Monday Night Raw, they'd kind of have the pay-per-view going. But when I look back at some of the stuff I did back in the day, I was like, oh man, I can critique myself as just as well as I can critique the current product and say, dude, you could have done. Hey, don't get me wrong, I got over, but I can look back at myself and say, dude, that you need to do that better. Or that punch was a shits or whatever. But
you know what? You shouldn't do that.
It's done.
Oh yeah, have no regrets. Have no regrets, man. It's funny. I do every now and then see or hear something on the network or whatever, or on the internet. Some of my commentary or things that I've said in the past, back during the Attitude Era when you were out there, and I think, oh my God, how on earth were we able to say that kind of stuff? And all I think about in that case is how much society has changed and how much you can't say now, because I just realize, and this has to be in your mind nowadays, everything you say will offend somebody. Everything. And now everybody out there that's listening has a voice with the internet, and that voice can be heard. So, I mean, I watched some of the stuff that we used to say and just so, man, oh man. But that was basically probably before the internet, before everybody would get all up in arms and get all upset. There were people out there probably offended at the time, but they just, more people were entertained by it than were offended by it. But nowadays, if you get 5 or 6 people to send in an email saying, "Oh, this is bad," the WWE, they've got a social media department now. They're out there. Everything that is said on social media, there's a whole department of people that are looking at everything that the fans say about WWE and critiquing it. And unfortunately, I've come to find out that there are more people that like something, they won't say anything about it. I mean, they just know they like it. But people that don't like something, they'll go to the time and trouble to criticize it and get the message out there. I've never seen so much. I when I look at social media now, I think, why are you people even wrestling fans? I don't even know why you call yourself wrestling. Why do you even watch if it's like nothing that you don't like anything that you see? Right. It's just like everything that comes across is negative. And I'm thinking, how do these people even call themselves wrestling fans, or why are they even bothering to watch if they don't like what they're seeing? I don't get it.
Oh, I know, but just as far as, what you can do or what you can say going from back in the day even to now, but I've been podcasting for about 6 years. I mean, the audio landscape has changed just as far as people getting riled up about the littlest of things. And one of the things that's kind of, I hate getting taken out of context. If I make a comment about some of the work or some of the promos, all of a sudden it's Stone Cold Steve Austin buries or criticizes this of this company. And like, hey man, I might have been talking about it, but I wasn't crapping all over it. I was making a comment as far as a critique so that maybe someone could get some heads up, learn something, some advice, a tip. I wasn't trying to take a dump on it, but all of a sudden that's what makes the headline. So it's clickbait.
Because that's their opinion. that you were doing. They don't know what's in your mind and what you're really saying. But in their opinion, they think you're dumping on it. So then all of a sudden, boom, they get on that keyboard and they punch it up that you were criticizing this or you were dumping on this. And that's the sad state of the affairs that we're in these days.
Hey,
too much political correctness nowadays.
Oh, way too much PC. Everybody just needs to get over it. I mean, it's 2020 now. Why are we worse off than we were 10, 15 years ago? Seemed like everybody had a little bit thicker skin. But I digress. We don't need to go into that because we'll get thrown down on the internet. Hey, I was watching some USWA from back in the day, and Lance Russell and Dave Brown were doing a commentary. There was you, there was Dundee, there was Dutch Mantell, there's Jimmy Hart, Kevin Sullivan, Steve Kern with a laid back promo, Wayne Ferris, Chick Donovan is coming to the territory. And Lance Russell was asking everybody their dream match or dream scenario. And I was sitting there watching him interview these guys, and then he interviews a guy, Dream Machine, Troy Graham. Holy smokes. It was a locker room full of promos, guys that could just run their mouths, make sense, get something over, and I could identify with. First of all, let's talk about that old locker room. And then this was from, I think, maybe 77, 79. It might have been 81. But it was in that time frame, because you were there.
Oh, yeah.
Tell me a little bit about the Dream Machine, Troy Graham, because I had never really heard of him. I'd heard Dream Machine, but then all of a sudden I see the guy with the mask on. God dang, man. He was basically doing Dusty.
Yeah.
Everybody cut a promo back in.
And he was one of the best. And as far as talent that's passed away or whatever that I enjoyed working with, Troy Graham or Dream Machine was one of the best. I loved working with the guy. I loved doing angles with him. Even when I was out for a year with a broken leg, he was the guy that I made my comeback against because I knew that it would have a great match. But you'd never believe, we were just the only way I can say it, we were so lucky. I mean, really, it had to be an incredible amount of luck that we had down in Memphis at that particular time for that group of talent to accumulate in one territory. It was unbelievable. Like that list of names that you mentioned, and that doesn't even scratch the surface of some of the guys. Handsome Jimmy Valiant and Austin Idol and all of these guys that just came into Memphis almost at the same time. And when I say an incredible amount of luck, Troy Graham, we were, I guess I know you do remember a little bit about, you did some Memphis TVs where nowadays in the WWE, they got 15 or 20, maybe even 30 writers, the creative staff, and they're writing the TVs, and then they submit it to Vince, and he makes changes, and then they rewrite it and everything. And when I was booking the territory in Memphis, I would work a match in Blytheville, Arkansas, which was an hour and a half away from Memphis, and Calhoun would be driving, and we'd get in the car after the match, and I'd sit down with a yellow legal pads, and I would write Memphis TV in that hour and a half from the time we left Blytheville to the time we got home to Memphis. And nobody saw anything until Saturday morning. We'd get there 1 hour before the show, and I would have the TV laid out on that sheet for 90 minutes, and I'd have everybody come in, and I'd say, and that was the great thing. I didn't go in and say, here's exactly what you need to say. Here's some bullet points. You're working with Jimmy Hart's going to be in your corner, or Jimmy Hart's this and that, and I just laid the interviews out, and we had such great talent in that these guys were able to go out there and cut their own promos, and their stuff, their work was so good. But anyway, talking about Troy Graham, one morning I don't know what the deal is. How Memphis TV was. Somebody be booked and not show up. And so anyway, we were short two guys, and this is honest to goodness truth. There would be a crowd that would start lining up outside the show for Saturday morning. The audience, we'd hold about 100 or 150 people in the studio audience, and there would be guys that would, like little independent workers or something like that. The guy wanted to be in the business or something, that would come to the matches all the time. And one morning we were short two guys, and I told Jimmy Hart, I said, I don't know what we're going to do, man. Go out and look at the crowd and see if there's anybody out there that looks like a wrestler, that maybe that has any experience. He goes out and he comes back in. He said, man, there's a guy out there named Troy Graham that says that, that he's wrestled a little bit. And he said, I asked him to talk a little bit and cut a promo. And he said, damn, he sounds just like Dusty Rhodes. I said, bring his ass in here. And we put him on TV that day, and he was like an instant star. It was just, he was literally standing out in the crowd waiting to come in and watch the matches. And we put him on TV that morning, and we loved him. There's some of the greatest things. Man, some of our greatest things on Memphis TV involved Dream Machine. Remember the time we used to couldn't even say it this days and time, we used to tar and feather matches?
Yeah.
Of course, we used syrup. We'd pour, pancake syrup all over somebody and then throw the feathers on them. And, oh my gosh, we tarred and feathered Dream Machine one day, and he had the mask on, he had those feathers stuck down his throat and all in his face, and he just came out and he just dumped all the feathers on him, and he just stood there, and Lance is looking at him holding the microphone, and he just went, Lawler! Lawler! And just for like 3 or 4 minutes, he just screaming my name, and you could just see that he was just boiling. Just little things like that, but he was great, man, and I really miss Troy.
The Steve Austin Show. The Steve Austin Show.
Even though football has officially come to a close, the action in basketball, hockey, UFC, and more continues to heat up. Prime time in the NBA this week. Rockets at Lakers. Blazers at Jazz. March Madness is right around the corner. Big games in the NCAA this week. Number 10, Seton Hall at number 8, Villanova. Duke versus North Carolina. In the Octagon, UFC 247 this Saturday, February the 8th. John Bones Jones versus Dominic Reyes. Now, I love UFC. It's hard for me to see John Bones Jones getting beat. It can't happen, but we'll see. My money's on John Bones Jones. Visit our good friends and exclusive partners of PodcastOne. Bet online to take advantage of the best bonuses in the business for this momentous occasion. Sign up today for a free account at betonline.ag and use the promo code PodcastOne for a 50% sign-up bonus. Again, that's BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts and exclusive partners of PodcastOne Sportsnet. If you purchase supplies for a small to mid-sized business, Zorro.com, Zoro.com is your go-to resource. At Zorro, you'll find all the things that keep a business running, no matter what kind of business you're in. Zorro offers tools, safety equipment, cleaning and maintenance supplies, office and shipping, automotive, industrial equipment, and more, including specialty items you can't find anywhere else. Whether you're shopping for an office, factory, contracting business, or machine shop, you can get exactly what you need. And when you shop at Zorro, you'll find brands you already know and trust. Brands like 3M, Prestone, Milwaukee Tool, Schneider Electric, and Proto, all at competitive prices. You want free, fast shipping? It's yours when you spend $50 or more. And if you have a question, a return, or need help finding exactly the right item, count on Zorro's customer service team right here in the U.S. Visit Zorro.com/Austin. That's Zorro.com/Austin. And sign up for Z-Mail to get 15% off your first order. Zorro.com. All you need to make your business go.
This is the Steve Austin Show.
But going back to what you're saying, give a guy a couple of bullet points and you just let them kind of hone it and turn it into their style, because all you are is an extension of yourself. Even if it's way out there, it's something that you can identify and it's part of you.
I know when it wasn't this time, it was a few years ago, really. But when I was not doing the show on a regular basis, but I would come back and do WrestleMania or Royal Rumble or something like that, and I'll never forget. I'm in the back, and you've come back, and all of a sudden you'll get something from the writers interview they want you to cut, right? And I'm standing there in the back, and I looked over, and I see Ric Flair reading a promo that some 20-year-old kid has written for him. And I thought, oh my God, what on earth has happened to the business? That's part that I don't get. But you know what, I really think a little bit of that is changing now with Heyman in charge of Raw.
It seems to be.
Yeah, he's letting guys, like you said, give them some bullet points and letting them go on their own.
Hey, so who are some of your favorite guys to work down there in Memphis? I know you can't list everybody, but you know some of those classics you had with Dundee were just off the charts.
Yeah, Dundee and I, we probably wrestled each other maybe 1,000 times. No kidding. I mean, and we just had such good chemistry. And the funny thing was, Dundee would not have that great of matches with anybody else. It was just something about he and I. We just had that chemistry where we could really work together well. But oh my gosh, you know, one of the guys that I think is was so underrated back then. I used to love to work with him when he was the AWA World Champion, and to me, he was just the epitome of what I thought a world champion would be. Was Nick Bockwinkel. Yeah. Oh my gosh, he was such a smooth worker. The great interview. I mean, you know, he just conducted himself and held his. He had that ability to look down on the fans and talk down to them and everything, and you know, just like the arrogant heel that he seemed to be. I mean, I loved working with him. But oh my God, Terry Funk's unbelievable. We had great matches. Handsome Jimmy Valiant, Bill Dundee, Austin Idol. Golly, we just had so many, and I worked with every one of them. I was on the main event every week for almost 20 years in Memphis.
But you also worked with Dory Funk Jr. So what was the difference between working with Terry and Dory? Because Dory's more that scientific guy. Terry Funk could do it all, but more of a brawler, kind of seemed to be more stylistically a better matchup.
Yeah, you're right.
Wrong?
Exactly. You're exactly right. And the only time I worked with Dory basically was when he was the champion. And actually, I take it back. I worked with Dory leading up to working with Terry when Terry was the champion. And oh my gosh, I'll never forget. It was just a great stuff. Dory came in and. Like you said, he was just such a classic technical wrestler, and I mean but they worked well for us because he would take me and just out wrestle me and all that kind of stuff, and then you really had to cheat to beat the guy because it was so easy for him to show the people that if it just came down to wrestling, who was the best, and so that was the classic way that wrestling was back then. But I'll never forget, he came in, he put me over because I was to get into the championship match with Dory, and with Terry, and then Terry cut a promo that was just out of this world, and he's standing there and he said, "I'll never forget when I saw my brother get off the plane and he had tears in his eyes. I knew what had happened. I knew you had screwed my brother, Lawler. I knew you and everybody in Memphis has cheated my brother. And now I'm going to have to come down there and defend the family name." He was a great man. He was just awesome. Then of course that led up to the empty arena match with Terry, and this we had so much fun. And as a matter of fact, we were doing a show April the 25th at the Fitzgerald's Casino down in Tunica, right 16 miles south of Memphis. And some of the times back in the day, with the way you would do a big angle, it's going to be hard to do it now because we don't have the TV to work off of. But sometimes if you got a big tag team match against two big villains, and you would go out on TV and say, you know what, I need the toughest partner that I can think of to go against these two guys. And the toughest guy that I can think of is the guy that gave me the hardest battles. And, and then you'd pick a heel of somebody that you'd work with and had a big program with, that the people would think, oh, these guys would never team up, but then all of a sudden you team up to take care of whoever it is. So I'm going to try. I talked to him the other day, and he said, I'm interested. I'm going to try to get Terry to come down and be my partner and us be a tag team. And I told him, I said, don't worry, just you being there, I'll handle everything we got to do. But he said, what'd be great, Lawler? I said, what? He said, at the end of the match, I'll do something to you and turn on you. And then he said, you pull my damn pants down and let me run out of that building butt naked. I said, okay, we can do that if you just come and be there. So that may be what we do on April the 25th.
Hey, man, when you work with some of those guys that you had great chemistry with and had a lot of respect for, like a Terry Funk or a Nick Bockwinkel, guys like that, you're over. You're at the same level they are. Who's calling the match?
Oh, that's a good question. Terry and I, we would take turns. I mean, we would just, he's so easy. He was just, Terry Funk he would go for anything. And I was such a fan of watching the thing. I mean, who else can take a bump and wind up and stand up? All of a sudden, he's got a metal folding chair down around his neck. He would do things like that in matches that it just would. I mean, it would get over so much with me. I mean, you hit him, fall down, all of a sudden he stands up, and he's got a folding chair over his head, and staggering around, and I just had to laugh half the time. But Nick Bockwinkel, he would call it. I don't know. It was like everybody knew that that I was like the top guy there in Memphis. Yeah. So it would certain people like Nick Bockwinkel. It was 50-50 too. But most of the other ones I would call the match. Always call the match with Dundee. But it was just there was not a lot of. It certainly wasn't like today. Wasn't everything was laid out and you knew what you were going to do. You let the people call the match. You responded to you did what the people were responding to.
Man, that was one of the things that was really refreshing to me when I went down there and I was green as grass and I was horrible. But you go to Nashville Coliseum, whatever it's called, Nashville Fairgrounds.
Yeah, Fairgrounds.
You bid that building. It's a rectangular shaped building, and the hill's over here and the baby's over here. You'd be in that dressing room, and either Paul or Frank Morrell would cross ways, and they'd come over to me. Hey, man, kid, he's going to catch you with his finish. Call it out there. Or, that's all I had to remember going to the ring. There was nothing for me to forget. It's very easy for me to remember somebody's finish. Yeah. And so I could, and God dang, you was working, 5 to 7 days a week. And, repetition, that's the best way to get better. But just not having anything to remember and then get a chance to work with the guys. And I never forget, we was going to it was Louisville, Kentucky. And I was working with Nightmare Danny Davis. And since, I'm 6 months in the business, everybody's calling my matches. We work 3 times. You're calling stuff while we're walking around. I can't hear nothing.
What?
Yeah, it was terrible. It was terrible. I don't know. You were booking the territory. I don't know why you booked me with you. I was horrible. I would have loved to work with you when I was in my prime, when you were in your prime. But back to the story. I go there and Danny Davis, I say, hey, Danny, what do you want to do? He goes, whatever you want to. He goes, I've been watching. You're doing good. You call it. I said, Danny, man, he said, I didn't think of anything because, I wouldn't learn from you. He goes, no, you go ahead and call it. If you get lost, I'll help you out. And it was unbelievable because probably at the time, Danny had 13, 15 years experience. Sure. Went out there and had a great match because Danny's Danny. But it was very interesting. But calling the stuff in the ring and just having a bullet point or if you're gonna work 20 minutes or some of the classics you put in, and you only had to remember 5 things. Oh, yeah. Maybe heat spot, hope spot, finish, something big, place to do something.
That's one of the things that amazes me about today's talent, and I guess you got to really take your hat off to them, is how on earth do they remember these matches that are so choreographed, move after move after move? I just think, Lord, what do you do if you forget one of those moves right in the middle? Where do you go? How do you pick back up to what you laid out? Because, they literally, a lot of these matches are laid out move for move from start to finish. I could never do that. Never remember that.
Well, I can't either. But and one of the problems in that is everything's so together. So you kind of start seeing the tells, or you can see where it's going next because of the movements. And man, when you kind of start losing that magic, you kind of start. I know we're in 2020, but Jesus Christ, it's just different business. A couple more questions, and I had a million more, but we've been talking for a little bit, and we're here to promote your podcast. One of the guys that I really enjoyed watching you work with in the WWF at the time, now WWE, was Bret the Hitman Hart.
Oh, yeah.
So you started, you got a ton of heat, burying Stu and Helen, classic stuff. And then when you and Bret would get in the ring, stylistically, some people always say, yeah, people with different styles make good matchups. I disagree. I think people with the same styles match up well. And so like your work, yeah, when you wanted to hit the gas, you'd speed up, but you were very deliberate, a brawler, took your time, great punches. To me, Bret was very similar in that regard. He had to do more technical stuff or wrestling, but as far as pacing, great punches, sell like crazy for you, and you sold like crazy for him. To me, y'all had tremendous chemistry and had great matches. Did you enjoy working with Bret? Because it looked like he did.
Yeah, I absolutely did. And I always had the feeling that he did not feel the same way.
Really?
No, I felt like he didn't like working with me. And I felt that way, I guess, because I sort of heard it through the grapevine that, and I think we've said this before. I think some of the stuff that I said about his parents, that at the time it was so sensitive, and I believe that Bret thought, and he told me later this was not the case. I believe that Bret thought that it was really hurt his parents' feelings, and it wasn't until years later. We were in Canada one night, and they had brought Bret out, and he told me that night. He said, "You know what?" He said, "I was always a little pissed off about the stuff you'd say about my parents because I thought it hurt their feelings." And he said, "But I swear to you, my mom came to me one time and said, I really miss Jerry Lawler being on there because I loved when he would talk about us." And he said, "What do you mean you loved it?" She said, "Oh, yeah, we loved it, me and your dad, because that made us feel like we were part of the show." And so he said, I had a whole different outlook after my mom told me that they enjoyed that stuff. But, the thing when I look back on that, though, the stuff that I said about his parents was so personal. Yeah. And, Steve, that's what we always looked for, a personal issue. When you can because the fans can recognize a personal issue. And when I'm going out there and, Bret had this whole big family, all his brothers and sisters. And when I go out there and say, Stu and Helen Hart produced more tragedies than Shakespeare, I mean, that's the kind of stuff. And I said, Stu really embarrassed everybody by asking for seconds at the Last Supper and stuff like that. So, and that the people could see where that would piss Bret off,
Yeah, but you never crossed a line as far as something, personal, something kayfabe. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, no, it was all
it was personal to the fans, yeah, but he took it for a shoot, maybe.
Yeah, I think he did. And of course, one time to get our program started, I did come in and I came out there and I was supposed to work with him, but I came out on a crutch. And then I wound up breaking the crutch, or hit him in the back with the crutch. And I guess I don't know if I was all fired up or just a spud or whatever, but he said I hit him like right in the back of the neck and the base of his skull with that metal crutch, and it broke. The crutch just broke, right? And so he thought I hit him really hard on purpose. And holy crap, later on, when he put that freaking sharpshooter on me, I thought he did say later, I thought he was going to break my freaking back. So, I mean, there was some stuff in there that was kind of stiff, and probably mostly on his part. I don't think I really stiffed him because I was kind of afraid of him at the time.
I just watched that angle yesterday. The crutch looked good. It didn't look stiff. It looked good. So maybe one shot caught him. Hey, that's a funny thing. So the sharpshooter, that's a shoot?
Oh, my God. It was when he put it on you. Yes, he can make it shoot. He can make it a shoot or a work.
Well, he must have always worked with me because I passed out in a pool of blood after being in that thing for almost 2 minutes. He must have been taking care of me.
Oh, well, I guess so, because, man, as soon as he put it on me, I was okay.
Hey, I'll ask you one last wrestling question. I'll let you go. But when we talk again, I've got a bunch of other stuff from some huge stars that were down there in your neck of the woods that you got a chance to work with. But I was watching some of the stuff when I was looking at your Bret Hart angles. And he always said on one of the specials at WWE said that he was a big fan of Archie Goudlie. And Archie Goudlie came out of Canada, the Mongolian Stomper. And so he was just blown away by the work of the Mongolian Stomper. I was watching one of the angles shot down there in the USWA, and Archie Goudlie is there in person. What were your thoughts about the Mongolian Stomper?
Well, the Mongolian Stomper was, I didn't get to know him all that well. He came into the territory. This was once again probably in maybe 75 or something like that. Me and Jerry Jarrett sort of got on the outs about something, and I went down to Florida and actually got myself a little condominium down there. And I was working down there for about 6 months, and during that time, he brought in Archie, the Mongolian Stomper, and got over like $1 million. I mean, he was just what the territory needed, and there wasn't anybody that he was like a Brock Lesnar to this territory at that time.
I agree. Big dude.
Yeah, big dude, and there wasn't anybody in the territory at the time. I'll never forget they tried to bring in, what did we call this guy? Oh, Zambui Warrior or something. I'm not sure. But anyway, then they brought in this big black guy that was, he is a big physique. He was about the same size as Archie and everything, but he was just so green, and he looked the part, and I think they built him up to where they actually finally had the big match and drew a big crowd. But then the poor guy he just wasn't ready yet. He was just too green, and so they couldn't do anything. And then finally, I can't remember exactly why or how, but then they brought me back. And then Archie and I worked a bunch of stuff together. We did the deal where we had all the matches we could have together, and then they put us together as a team and that sort of thing. And he did the loaded boot gimmick, the Mongolian Stomper. I just saw something the other day on me and him working together, and he would make sure everybody knew the boot was loaded. He would take his boot completely off and have who was it? At first, he had two different managers in here. The first one was
one of them was Gorgeous George.
Yeah, Gorgeous George. But Sonny King managed him. But then there was another. I always got it mixed up sort of with Sonny King, but there was another black bald-headed wrestler that managed him before Sonny King. He came here from another territory too. What was his name? But he was only here for a short time. Then I think they put him with Sonny King, and then he left for a while. Then he came back and was with Gorgeous George. But yeah, he would take the boot completely off, and his manager would hand him something like brass knuckles or something, and he'd drop that down in his boot, and then he would tap the toe. He would go all the way with the loaded boot gimmick.
Hey, I was listening to you tell a story. I guess people were talking about all the wrestlers hanging out in bars, and your comments were like, well, back in the day, we weren't always hanging out in the bars because we were in a territory. So after the show, we were driving on to the next town, or maybe back home to the house, because you're going right back out the next day. When you came into WWE, you came in about 92?
Yeah, 92 or 93, yeah.
Give or take. So, and all of a sudden, then you're kind of flying all over the United States, and now you're flying all over the world. Man, if you go back in time, did you have a preference? Because I had a blast working Tennessee. I was starving, and I was learning, and I was paying my dues, but I loved it.
Yeah.
Is there a particular time or era or that you just, hey, it would have been cool if I'd stayed in the Tennessee territory my whole life, or you like flying all over the world?
Oh, yeah, I definitely would have if the territories would have lasted. But, cable TV is what killed the territories. That once cable TV came out, and of course you had the Superstation, it was WCW, and then of course WWE got on a cable station, and then and a lot of people, I always look at it like this. A lot of people say Vince killed the territories off, but it wasn't Vince. It was the fact that all the main talent in the territories wanted to be on cable TV. They wanted to go from what was the localized version that had always been what wrestling was to being seen on one show all over the world, or all over, at that time, all over the country. And that's why the territories dried up, because they lost all the top talent. They didn't have a reason to stay. They wanted to go where they could be a big national star rather than just a regional star. So that pretty much killed the territories. Our territory stayed around longer than anybody else's because I was a part owner of the territory, and I didn't want to see it go under, so I didn't leave. And, we were able to, by the fact that I stayed here all the time and worked every week on TV, we could bring in lesser talent and make the people still think they were stars. But then it got to a point where the cable TV shows became so entrenched that all of a sudden the fans said, these are the big stars on national TV, and the guys that are still doing these local shows are like, they're local yokels. And the fans decided. I mean, the fans are the ones that thought that the WWE and WCW were the big deal, and that's why the territory days just kind of fell by the wayside. It wasn't. I don't think it was Vince that went out to put them all out of business or anything. That's just the way it happened. And most of the territories lost their main stars because they went off. And like I said, since I was the main star, owned part of this territory, we were able to last a little bit longer. But yeah, I would give anything if the business was the same as it was before cable TV. And you had your territory to go and drive to the matches and everything. I mean, you remember, man, we'd do our Saturday morning TV, and then we'd jump in the car and we'd head up to either Nashville or over to Jonesboro on Saturday night. Sunday, we'd usually have off. Then Monday, we did Memphis on Monday night. Our territory was so big at the time, we had two towns every night. You had Memphis on Monday and Birmingham on Monday. And then on Tuesday, we'd always go, you were always on the Memphis end. So Tuesday, we'd drive up to Louisville, Kentucky. And then Wednesday, over to Evansville, Indiana. And then Thursday, maybe Lexington, Kentucky, or maybe Nashville. And then Friday, Tupelo, Mississippi. And then just right back again, Saturday morning, we were on Memphis TV. There was a camaraderie between the guys that because you were not only, you were with those guys more than you were with your family, on the road all the time together, and staying over one or two nights a week and then driving back home or whatever. But yeah, it was some great times. I'll never forget, if you remember, I don't know what we were doing at the time when you came in, but we used to try to come up with all kind of crazy ways to pass the time on the trips. When you drive from Nashville to Louisville, it's 165 miles, and it was a 2.5 hour, 3 hour trip or whatever. We'd drive up the interstate. Nashville to Memphis was 200 miles. It's 3.5 hour drive. And that would get boring every week. So I'll never forget, we used to do all kind of crazy stuff on the road. We would do all kind of try to crazy tricks. I would remember I would get in my car and, back in the day, there was not always a console between the two seats, and I was in a big old Cadillac Eldorado, and I'd get over on the passenger side, and I would lift my foot across on the gas pedal, right, and then I'd hold my arm down where I just got the bottom of the steering wheel, but I'm sitting all the way on the passenger side, and I'd roll the window down, and when I see I'm about to pass one of the other guys, right, and I roll the window down, I'm sitting all the way over on the passenger side, and it looked like nobody was driving right. Hey, man. And I just drive on to pass them. And just stupid stuff. Then we got to one point where we would play this game on a trip. If you could ever you come up on somebody, if that was Calhoun or who, one of the other wrestlers, if you could throw something at their car, like a milkshake or something, and hit their windshield. And the way you would win is if they had to pull over to wipe the windshield. If they could get it off with the windshield wipers, that was, you get some points or something. But if they had to actually pull over and wipe the windshield off, you won. So, I remember we'd stop at like a 7-Eleven when Memphis was over on a Monday night. We'd grab eggs, we'd grab milkshakes, we'd grab anything. And then we'd try to get in front of you. And then people would be cutting you off. You couldn't. It was like the old dog fights in airplanes. Don't let this guy get in front of me. don't let it. And then when you got in front of you, you watch them. If they're throwing stuff out their sunroof, that you see it coming, you slam on the brakes and it hit the interstate in front of you or whatever. But yeah, we used to do crazy. And when I first came up to the WWE, I started doing some of that crap on the shows, and they had never seen anything like that. Nobody in the company had worked territories before, and all of a sudden I pull up, and I'm throwing eggs out of the car, and they're going, "What the crap is this guy doing?"
Those are the good old days. We kind of started doing that in WCW as well, and it was bad because most of the guys kind of played within some framework of rules. But man, when you got the Steiner brothers in front of you, you never know what was going. A shopping cart might come out our window.
Yeah.
So, but it was lucky that nobody was killed, crashed, or killed a civilian, because there was some crazy shenanigans done on the road. But God dang, it was fun.
I'll never forget Sam Bass and I were driving one time, and we were down somewhere in Georgia or whatever, and Terry Garvin, remember Terry?
Yeah.
Hands of Stone, Terry Garvin? Holy crap. Me and Sam were notorious. Poor Sam, it cost him his life because he did get killed in a car accident on the interstate. But we were the worst. We'd never, as soon as we get on the road, we'd never.
Terry Garvin or Hands of Stone, Ronnie Garvin?
I mean, Ronnie Garvin.
Okay,
yeah,
go ahead.
Of course, they were partners, Ronnie and Terry, at the time, but it was Ronnie Garvin. And but anyway, and Sam and I, we would never drive under 100 miles an hour on the interstate. And back then, of course, the speed limit was 75. They wouldn't even think about giving you a ticket unless you were going over 90. So we drive 100 miles an hour on these trips all the time. And one time, Sam and I were going down the interstate, and we're just talking about, I don't know, playing Dr. Hook on the damn 8-track or something. And we're talking, and we're going 100 miles an hour, and I'm driving, right? And all of a sudden, my car started bumping, just like it got a engine surge or something. I went, what the heck? And I looked down my car and I said, what is that, Sam? And boom, surged again. Holy crap. I'm going 100 miles an hour, and I look in my rearview mirror, and there's Ronnie Garvin. He's bumping me from behind. I said, damn, look at this idiot. And he looks at Randy and he says, don't hit the brakes. Don't hit the brakes. What are you doing? Yeah, it was crazy. Ronnie bumping us at 100 miles an hour in the back of the car.
Hey, I was watching, still on the same subject. I was watching a match. I got to say this. I've been trying to get the go home button forever. I was watching a match. It was a tag match. It was you and Austin, Norvell Austin.
Norvell Austin, yeah.
I was watching a tag match. It was you and Norvell Austin against Phil Hickerson and Dennis Condrey.
Oh, my God,
I think it was around 77. Man, because you started wrapping that dog chain around your hand and started just laying in those guys, and everybody started bleeding. I believe it was in Mid-South Coliseum. It was just unbelievable action. Of course, Lance Russell was laying it down on a damn microphone. But a lot of times, one of your classic things was to kneel down. If that guy's facing that way, right there, you just start punching him right in his forehead. One of your trademarks.
Yeah.
But the point I'm getting to, I love the action, great matches. Is the Mid-South Coliseum in Memphis your favorite building of all time? Because if it ain't, it's got to be in the top 3. People loved you there, and the acoustics were unreal. Those planks off that, I think y'all working off a 16-foot ring.
Yeah, yeah.
God dang, just the acoustics, just your knees hitting those boards and the guys ricocheting, and just the bumps on a comeback.
Yeah,
give me your favorite building, Jerry.
No, the Mid-South Coliseum, without a doubt. I mean, yeah, so many matches, so many main events, and that it was just perfect. Like you said, the acoustics, the look of the building, the chairs, everything, just and it was just the right size. I mean, you knew. I mean, if I don't care what you did, the best you could do in Memphis, if you had the whole town talking about something, you could draw, a little over 10,000 people, and that was amazing in Memphis.
Oh yeah.
I mean, we went for weeks there in Memphis, and they would run Madison Square Garden every month in New York, and they would draw 20,000 people once a month in New York and Madison Square Garden. We were drawing 10,000 people a week every single week, so we were drawing 40,000 people a month. We were outdrawing New York City, at that time. And the building itself, just the way it was laid out, and so many memories, so many matches there. Yeah, that's without a doubt my favorite building. And you know what's so sad is that building is still, if you walked up to it today on the outside, it looks exactly like it did in 1975. And you can walk inside, which we just did a tour of it just a few weeks ago, as a matter of fact. Inside the building, it just looks exactly the same. They've kind of used it as a storehouse now. It's just been mothballed, but all of the chairs are sitting there, those same chairs that people sat in to watch Elvis Presley, or as I sat in to watch the Beatles in 1966, and that they sat in every Monday night to watch all the wrestling shows. They're all sitting there in the Coliseum right to this day, but it's just sitting there mothballed for some reason. I don't know why they can't do something with that beautiful building.
I never forget, I broke into the Sportatorium in Dallas, Texas. You've been there a million times, and that place was a wrestling building. Elvis played there, George Jones, all those guys, but it smelled like piss, popcorn, hot dogs, stale beer, but it felt like wrestling, especially when they packed them in there. And all of a sudden, Jarrett buys out Von Erich. I'm working on a freight dock. I said, "Hey, Jerry, P.Y. High, which is Phil Hickerson, came in there, was beating the hell out of me with a weightlifting belt and a kendo stick. I was a young white meat baby face and long blonde hair. And I asked Jerry, I said, "Hey, Jerry, when do you think I can start working full time?" I was horrible. And he goes, "Hell, Steve, I think you're ready now. We'll send you to Memphis in a couple of weeks." Sure enough, a couple of weeks later, there I was driving to Memphis in my Hyundai Excel that almost got repossessed the whole time I was working in the Tennessee territory, $154 a month. I'll never forget it. I rolled up right, a couple hours before the show started, Memphis, Coliseum, and it was like Dutch was booking. He told me what I was doing, and didn't know what the hell I was doing. But that building, it was just magic. There was something about it. Louisville Gardens was cool too. I mean, Evansville was cool for what it was. The fairgrounds at Nashville. But there's something about when I watch them old matches, some of those classic ones y'all had from Mid-South Coliseum, just badass. I don't know. I get hung up on stuff like that. I digress. Let's wrap this thing up. Jerry, tell people about your damn podcast. And I didn't mean to talk your ears off, but man, I just talked to you all day about the old school wrestling.
Yeah, well, I could too. Trust me. And we do a lot of that on my podcast. I had a podcast for the last couple of years, actually, called Dinner with the King. It was on a different, and I had a different co-host, and we need to do a show. We need to do a podcast one day to tell you about what happened with my old podcast called Dinner with the King and my host, which I'd known the guy for 9 years, and I thought he was a close friend of mine, and found out. I like the guy so much that it's hard for me to now even think that he did all this stuff that he did intentionally. I think that he just went through some bad times. But anyway, he got me all screwed up to where he was taking advantage of the fans on the podcast by contacting them and offering them commissioned artwork by me, offering them crowns that I'd worn in the ring, offering them shirts that I'd worn on Raw, and he would have them buy this stuff and send a payment to him personally through his PayPal account and never tell me anything about it. And then all of a sudden, after a few months, I was sitting in New York and I'm doing a signing at a WrestleCon up there. And this guy comes up and he says, "Hey, Jerry, when do you think I might be able to get that artwork you promised me?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" And anyway, he starts telling me, he said, "Well, through the guy's name was Glenn Moore." He said, "Through Glenn, I bought some artwork. I paid $600 and something for it. And he keeps telling me that you just hadn't had a chance to do it, that you're going to get around to it." Anyway, make a long story short, Glenn and I had to part ways, but before we did, he had done that to probably 20 or 30 people and really taken them for a lot of. I got sued by a person that he had taken $1,500 for me to paint a picture, and I knew nothing about it, and so. So anyway, that's where, and he was the guy that was kind of behind that Dinner with the King podcast. He had put it all together, and so that kind of went away. And then I got approached by the people at PodcastOne that you're with, and I got me a new host named Sean Reedy. And we just simply called it the Jerry Lawler Show because Sean told me, he said, man, I used to love to watch a Jerry Lawler show down in Memphis that was on for 5 years on Sunday mornings on Channel 5. So anyway, we just called it the Jerry Lawler Show, and it's just this. It's me talking with we try to get a different guest every week. We don't always. And I told him at the beginning, I've never felt comfortable imposing on somebody to come in, and I know you do the same thing. We talked about this before. I never felt comfortable calling up somebody and say, hey, will you give up an hour or a half hour of your time one day just to be on my podcast? I always sort of felt bad doing that. So a lot of times it'll be me just reflecting on old Memphis wrestling stories or what went on this week in the WWE. I have a lot of guests on too. Like this week's show, I just had Drew McIntyre on, which you got to get Drew McIntyre on here.
All right.
He's a great guest to talk to. He's a really good guy. And so it's very similar to yours. It's just a guy talking about old times a lot of times,
It's fun talking to people, but sometimes, I just like shooting the breeze by myself. I have my wife on, reluctantly so, but
really,
she hates to be on my podcast. But sometimes,
I'm going to have to get Lauren on.
Yeah, no, I'd be happy to be on your show just anytime. Give me a yell because I'd like to have you back on this one. We'll keep it at 60 minutes. We talked for almost 2 hours today. When does your show drop every week on PodcastOne?
Every week on Friday.
Every week on Friday, check out the Jerry Lawler Show. God dang, King, it's been good talking to you. And it's damn near 10 minutes short of 2 hours. And I had a lot of stuff here I didn't even get to, but I'd love to get it to you, get back with you down the road and do it again. And if you need a guest, feel free to impose on me.
All right. I'll do it now. That's what I told. I just saw Drew McIntyre Monday night, and he said, I'd like to be on your show. And I said, don't tell me that unless you mean it, because I'll damn sure call you.
Yeah.
So I called him, and he said, oh, man, he just did it like that. And it has been, I'm sure that you find this when you do have somebody on. They're honored to be on the Stone Cold's podcast. I mean, it's a big deal to be on. You're the top podcast in the world. Everybody wants to be on there with you. So, anyway, after I did Drew McIntyre, and I sent him a text and thanked him. He said, "Are you kidding? What an honor it was for me to be on the show with you." So it's fun.
Well, good luck with it.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on. I appreciate the plug here, and like I said, I will definitely call you.
All right, everybody, give me to go home. Here's time to wrap up this podcast and ride off in the sunset. But before I do that, I want to thank Jerry the King Lawler, my guest today on the show. Jerry the King Lawler is one of the best to ever lace up a pair of boots. His body of work, the feuds, the angles, the matches, the stories he's told, way, way, way up there on just having a badass body of work. A guy who's one of the biggest draws down there in the southern region, in Memphis particularly. But, I mean, Lawler, he's not in the Hall of Fame for no reason. Also one of the greatest to ever pick up a microphone and cut a promo and tell a story. Guy can run his mouth like it's nobody's business. Jerry, thanks for being on the show. Good luck to you on your podcast. Hey, folks, I got a curveball coming for you next week. I've got another wrestler coming here on the show. He stopped by a few days ago. He specializes in the death match, but he's also a scientific wrestler of a very high caliber as well. His name is, if you haven't heard of him, Ricky Shane Page. If you haven't heard of him, or you have, check out some of his matches and some of the stuff we'll talk about on the podcast that you can check out. But just go to the best of Ricky Shane Page, and you'll see a highlight reel of some of his deathmatch stuff and some of his scientific stuff. Great move set from a big guy, 6'4", 280, give or take in that ballpark. Can really tell a story. Can really work. And sometimes, I guess a lot of people don't think that the deathmatch guys can work, but man, many of them can, and this guy's a scientific wonder when it comes down to it. He's really, really good. So I enjoyed talking to Ricky Shane Page. Gregory Irons turned me on to this guy. Thank you, Gregory. Look forward to talking to Ricky Shane Page next week, and I think you'll enjoy the listen. If you want to reach me here on the podcast and suggest somebody that I talk to, send an email to questions@steveaustonshow.com. Before I get into the business here, I want to congratulate once again the Kansas City Chiefs. Andy Reid finally getting that first Super Bowl win. Patrick Mahomes, god dang, man, they had you game planned really good and finally come alive and lead that comeback. You've got people already calling you a future Hall of Famer after only 3 years in the league. What a special human being and what a special young man and what a probably once-in-a-lifetime athlete this guy has turned out to be, and ain't even 24 years of age yet. So congrats, Patrick, on leading this team and the entire Kansas City Chiefs organization, because it takes everybody from top to bottom to pull off something like this. Hey, folks, Broken Skull IPA, my IPA that I collaborated with El Segundo Brewing Company, has taken off all over the United States. This year in 2020, we're trying to, reach another 6 or 8 states. Texas, we are headed your way. Big shout out to the East Coast, New Jersey, New York, and Massachusetts for all the enthusiasm. Every time we put that stuff out there for sale, it just gets swooped up. We got another shipment coming your way ASAP. We're also up in Oregon. We're now all over California. Check out the elsegundobrewing.com, their website. Click on Broken Skull IPA. An interactive map will pop up, and you can see a location near you to buy Broken Skull IPA and everything else that is El Segundo oriented as far as beer. We love beer. Hey, folks, don't forget the King of Attitude shirts are available now at Pro Wrestling Tees store. Check out ProWrestlingTees.com/Steve Austin for those shirts, along with all of my other Broken Skull Ranch apparel. And if you're looking to get a badass pocket knife, and I suggest everybody have one, check out the Cold Steel Broken Skull knife or the Working Man's knife. Get them at my Amazon store. Amazon's got the best price on both knives. Just go to Amazon.com/shop/Steve Austin. And I want to say one more thank you to all the fine sponsors of the Steve Austin Show, especially Geico and Bet Online. That's how I'm able to do this podcast for you twice a week for free. Please support them because they support us. And if you need more info, check out the show description to this episode for details. Heading back to Nevada ASAP to get on my Kawasaki and blaze through the mountains. Folks, until next time, my name is Steve Austin, and I will catch your ass down the road.
This has been a Podcast One production. Download new episodes of The Steve Austin Show every Tuesday at PodcastOne.com. That's PodcastOne.com.
As the NFL season wraps up, you're going to want to check out the Dan Patrick Show for everything coming up. Dan and the Danettes provide the most up-to-date sports coverage every day of the week. Plus, Dan's got the biggest guests, the best commentary, and everything in between with a bit of fun on the side. Be sure to subscribe on Spotify, Podcast One, Apple Podcasts, and many other podcast apps so you can get new episodes every day.